Episode 312, Springtime. This is The Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Varroa update. 70% of the hives in the exclusion zone have now been euthanised and no new detections. Almost a textbook response to a biosecurity threat. Well done, boys and girls. As we enter spring in the Southern Hemisphere in general, and in Tasmania in particular, things are ramping up on the ground. I ran a minimum till over the 4 experimental blocks as September came to an end. As I did so, it took about 15 minutes for the poultry, the ducks and the chooks, to tweak to what was going on. They descended and were in danger of being rotivated as I tore up the grass cover to about 3 to 5 centimetre depth. It was a strange sight. Me and the machine trundling along slowly, and 37 ducks and 10 chooks diving into the soil behind me looking for treats. A bizarre variation on the Pied Piper. Unfortunately, I was unable to both do the job and film the birds at the same time, so you'll have to take my word for it. Instead of saving the buckwheat for the end of summer, I'm putting it in early and oversowing with white clover. The thinking is this: the buckwheat will cover the soil quickly. I'm sowing at a higher rate to achieve cover rather than produce seed. As that gets established, I'll plant blue corn into one of the blocks, wheat into another, potatoes into a third, and barley into the fourth. We have a major rain event coming at the end of the week, 40 to 100 mils, that's 160 to 400 points in the old money. A weather system that hit the northwest of the mainland up in the Kimberleys of WA on the weekend, and it's working its way across the continent, heading in a slightly southeasterly direction. The rain will be welcome here in Tassie, even though some catchments will be on flood watch, or alert even. But much of the state is in water deficit, and the hydro dams are below where we'd like them to be entering summer. These are run down below where they'd normally be to make hay, so to speak, while the mainland was in electricity shortage. All of our power comes from hydro and wind with some rooftop solar in Tasmania, but we sometimes draw on coal gas-fired electricity from the mainland, but on the whole we're pretty green. The point being that with soil temperatures at 9 to 10 degrees, that's 48 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the rain and the newly sown buckwheat will get off to a flying start. However, being in the roaring 40s, that's the trade winds of the sail-powered era, the weather can be less than predictable, and I think the mix I'm using, all 4 crops, corn, wheat, potatoes and barley, plus the 5th one of buckwheat obviously, should get to harvest. But if odd conditions arrive, at least one will give us back more than the seed. And the buckwheat acts as a sort of insurance safety net behind everything else. And that's the plan and the theory. No plan survives contact with reality, but I think there's enough flexibility to respond when that reality arrives. And despite the coming rainfall event, that reality may well be a long, hot, dry summer. We are in a Mediterranean climate zone. Last year's summer was a long, hot, dry one. Despite a positive Indian Ocean dipole and La Nina in the Pacific, our little corner of Tassie, the northwest, dried considerably. Yet those two climactic drivers are still in place, so the eastern seaboard states of the mainland are likely to suffer some flooding again this year. A t-shirt was selling in the city of Lismore that said I survived the 1 in 100 years flood of 2022, 2022, 2022, 2021 and 2020. Things look unpleasant on the mainland if you're in a river catchment. Meanwhile, as spring progresses, the raspberries have burst bud, the pears are 3/4 of the way through flower burst, and the apples are just starting to put out leaf. 80% of the half-metre cuttings from 2 of the pear trees I took in winter appear to have taken root and are growing away as one would expect. The chooks are laying in amongst the agapanthus rather than their provided nest boxes, so we're having egg hunts every second day. The ducks are a bit slower this year, but they seem to be about to hit their stride. I suspect that'll improve after I cull the excess males, who are always a nuisance. The back two-thirds of an acre plots are coming into some fertility at last. Some blackberry issues that I'll deal with through constant mowing. This weakens the roots until they give up. Some will also be dealt with by the pigs who continue to renovate a couple of small areas of the paddocks. That back area will be planted out to rosemary and thyme hedges with a mix of white, red and crimson clovers to be sown between the hedges. The plan is to have an area for honey production over the coming years and to produce herbal essential oils down the track. And this summer should well be the last one with the pigs for a few years, as the replanting and experimental beds are settled in. There's no need for renovating pastures after they finish what they're doing this summer. Given the northern summer and its heat waves in Western Europe, fires and floods in the Americas, and what's occurred in Australia over the past 5 years, October has become a vac-pack month. A few days water, some survival food, some chocolate, changes of clothes, phone chargers, and of course backup recording devices are all ready to go if the ship hits the sand. It is with some relief each April to unpack these, knowing that we made it through another summer without disruption. Whilst not yet as extreme in general, Tasmania does have a history of catastrophic bushfires, so not as extreme as the mainland. Being ready is a sort of a mental safety net, and I would recommend it to anyone. As the days lengthen with what feels like increasing rapidity, the last frost is probably behind us, but we can never be certain. We're at 350 metres, that's about 1,000 foot, I guess. So 1 November or thereabouts is the goal for having the vegetables in and growing. So the next month is going to be busy. This is a wonderful time of the year, and I'm entering it 17.8 kilos lighter than last year. Intentionally, not from illness, with about another 10 to go. Probably by that 1st of November date, but we'll see. The extra available energy is a relief this spring, and I'd recommend considering losing a bit if you've been running in a good paddock. It does feel good. So as we enter the growing season down here and the Northern Hemisphere leaves theirs, I'll just remind one and all that the Change Underground Academy No Dig Gardening course is still available, link in the show notes. Please tell your friends, and remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back next week.